Join the new spirit of 76. America's new cause needs you.
In 1976, there was a real coming together as a nation.
It's more than fireworks, parades, and speeches. It's Bicentennial USA.
This 200th anniversary of the birth of America.
There was certainly a goal on the part of the people who designed the celebrations to try to bring people together.
This impression of community.
Bicentennial is a once-in-our-lifetime opportunity.
But there was a heavy overlay that year of continued wounds from what we had been through and kind of exhaustion.
It was a period when the Army was in great distress coming out of Vietnam.
Freedom Fest was dubbed Minnesota's gift to the Bicentennial.
I should not be surprised by the complete and utter erasure of Native people.
There was a lot going on. All those things were certainly real and had some impact.
Remember when you're seeing those fuzzy images, everybody smiling and waving, having a good time. That was real, but it was also only part of the story. When I think about mid-1970s in Minnesota, it had only been a couple of years before our governor appeared on the cover of Time magazine declaring that we had the good life.
This is all at the same time that we have a lot of other issues in our society: the Vietnam War, rising inflation, political turmoil.
The country had a gut punch. Watergate, issues of privacy, secrecy, FBI, J. Edgar Hoover looking under the bed for Reds.
The Watergate scandal was unlike the kind that people had seen before. They felt really betrayed in a deeper way than I think today people would react to such a thing. It drove down voter turnout in Minnesota in 1974. Something like 200,000 Republican voters didn't show up at the polls. That's how Governor Wendell Anderson won re-election, by carrying all 87 counties. The success of Jimmy Carter speaks to a desire on the part of a lot of Americans for a return to morality in the White House. And the fact that he chose Walter Mondale from Minnesota as his running mate, second time in the 20th century that a Minnesotan was chosen for the ticket.
Where do we go next? For some people, they decided, I'm just going to go back to regular life. Some people said, hey, we got to start repairing. Let's heal a little bit.
A 200th birthday party might help with this healing. So to get Minnesotans excited about the bicentennial, charismatic Governor Wendell Anderson literally dressed the part.
That photo was an invitation to all other Minnesotans to get on board. This is coming, this big birthday party we're going to have for the United States, and get ready for something big that's going to happen, and it's going to be fun.
Before the bicentennial fun could commence, it had to be organized. The United States had been planning for its two-century celebration, the bicentennial, since the late 60s. But with slow progress in Washington, the buck got passed to the states for a more local approach. And in Minnesota, one woman took on the monumental task of leading the state's planning and execution.
I was having coffee with a neighborhood group of women, and each one was kind of going around the table complaining about their husbands and kids. I thought, I don't need this. I'm going to go to work. I've got something to offer.
In 1975, Governor Anderson appointed Lois Polari to be the executive director of the Minnesota American Revolution Bicentennial Commission, or MARBIC.
I said, well, the bicentennial is not going to be about stuffing museums. This is really a people's celebration. It's got to have grassroots.
Lois Polari was everywhere. She crisscrossed the state, traveling more than 80,000 miles to attend meetings, ceremonies, and banquets, to preside over events, ride in parades, speak to communities, and encourage participation in the bicentennial.
As long as we had the staff and telephones and a mileage budget, we could make it work.
Joining Lois in this work was Oglala Sioux band member Ed McGaw, a decorated Vietnam veteran, lawyer, and author who brought his keen intelligence and personal experience with indigenous culture to his leadership role on Minnesota's Bicentennial Commission.
He was a Marine, and he became an F-4 Phantom pilot in Vietnam.
When he left the military in the late 60s, he moved to South Dakota and got his law degree, and then moved to Minnesota in 1970. Ed was very much an advocate for environmental issues and taking care of Mother Earth because it was such a sacred part of Native people's beliefs. It was a real honor for him to be the Bicentennial Chairman and to be appointed by Governor Wendy Anderson. He was uniquely positioned to represent the people from Indian country. With his unique perspective as a veteran, he could represent the average American as well. He was thrilled. He was energized by being a part of it. He embraced it and did a really good job.
This groovy animation of American iconography was part of the U.S. Information Agency's Young Filmmakers Bicentennial Grant Project. Another, very different bicentennial student film featured a Native American woman presenting her family's winter count, a traditional tool for recording and preserving tribal experience and history.
My name is Lydia Fire Thunder Bluebird. I am an Oglala Sioux.
The film was created by Minneapolis College of Art and Design student and future Hollywood editor Stephen Rivkin, brother of Bobby Z, the drummer for Prince's The Revolution. This ahead-of-its-time student film allowed the world to sit at the feet of a Lakota elder.
Each one of these pictures stands for 1 year. We did not use numbers. Instead, each year had a symbol.
Produced by the American Revolution Bicentennial Administration.
Tell us, Arba, where can our viewers go to see America's 200th anniversary celebration? Well, Gordon,
ARBA, or the American Revolution Bicentennial Administration, created several films and other media to warm Americans up to the approaching celebration. These educational shorts range from the interesting to the odd. And like a lot of the artifacts of America's 200th birthday, most have been forgotten.
Each person must find his or her own bicentennial, must find a way to relate today to yesterday, to find tomorrow in today. That's Bicentennial USA.
But there is one meaningful media production from the bicentennial that many Americans, even those born long after 1976, do know, and can probably sing along to.
I'm just a bill. Yes, I'm only a bill.
'Cause knowledge is power.
Schoolhouse Rock was short, animated, educational films that ran between cartoons on Saturday mornings. And they were really well done. They had great original music.
Conjunction, junction, what's your function?
The iconic I'm Just a Bill animated civics lesson is still echoing through pop culture. Composed by St. Paul native Dave Frischberg, this short was part of Schoolhouse Rock's America Rock season.
I'm one of the lucky ones. Most bills never even get this far.
These spots were roughly animated, but cleverly conceived, and driven by earworm jingles that hold up fairly well across the half-century since their first broadcasts.
Today I am still just a bill.
And most of them were about U.S. history or U.S. government.
There was a winsome tune about the United States being a nation of immigrants.
Our heritage is mixed, so any kid could be the president.
And a battle-by-battle account of the Revolutionary War. And of course, Bill, who provided a slightly confusing, but certainly charming, overview of the nation's messy legislative process. But some of the America Rock spots didn't age well at all.
Right from the beginning, they're like, oh, this was super easy, the Louisiana Purchase. It's like, no, it wasn't.
How'd you like to sell a mile or two?
Like, Napoleon was at war with all of Europe, and even in the United States, where it was like, oh, we're gonna go and spend $15 million to buy all of this land. that means that we are now absorbing all kinds of people into this country. What is America now?
But it took those early folks to open up the way.
Of course, most people watch it and they'll just be like, ooh, manifest destiny. That makes my skin sort of uncomfortable.
Elbow room.
Unfortunately, I think this is a good example of the revisionist history that we're fed as kids. You know, it's not showing us that the reason Napoleon sells the Louisiana Territory is because there's a rebellion by enslaved people in Haiti. It's not showing us that the Louisiana Territory and all of the lands beyond that were already home to thousands of native nations. We have to take a look at the wider sphere of what North America looks like in the mid to late 1700s. Native peoples have been contending with and contesting European incursions for centuries. You see this really long and incredible history of Native resistance to colonial impositions on their lands, on their cultures, and on their ways of life. Then there's the verse about manifest destiny.
There were plenty of fights to win land rights, but the West was meant to be. It was a manifest destiny.
I should not be surprised by the complete and utter erasure of Native people in this video, but it is really hard to watch it and to see how much of our history is just completely ignored in favor of this celebratory narrative of expansion. But now I am super conflicted because of how much little kid Katie adored Schoolhouse Rock.
But 50 years on, some of the refrains of Schoolhouse Rock still ring relevant to many Americans.
We're going to elect a president.
No more king.
He's going to do what the people want.
No more king.
We're going to run things our way.
No more king.
Nobody's going to tell us what to do.
Another bicentennial experience that was as popular then as it might be seen as insensitive now was the reverse wagon train. Instead of traveling west as in the 19th century, make-believe pioneers hitched horse to wagon and rolled east toward Valley Forge. In Minnesota, these travelers were celebrated with a send-off at the state fairgrounds.
I'd just like to revive a little of their courage.
Organizers encouraged citizens to sign rededication scrolls, which included over 22 million signatures, with the final signature from President Ford. Unfortunately, the scrolls were somehow misplaced, and like much of the bicentennial, are now mere memories for those who were there. There was one primetime public service announcement campaign that penetrated the consciousness of the nation.
I'm Zubin Mehta.
For those of us who were addicted to television back in 1975, 1976, one of the most memorable things that happened were these things called bicentennial minutes. They were these short historical segments that came on every night, and they would be introduced by a different narrator.
This is Jessica Tandy. 200 years ago today, British work gangs were stripping Boston bare of wood.
200 years ago today, a redcoat...
And they would always end with, and that's
the way it was. That's the way it was.
As if they were Walter Cronkite ending his newscast.
That's the way it is. Friday, July 31st.
So this happened every single night.
In an era where there were only 3 commercial TV networks to choose from, these spots would have eventually been seen by most American television viewers, for better or worse.
I guess I can't speak for everybody, but I got really sick of them.
Do you realize, Marie, that the bicentennial minutes won't go into reruns for another 100 years?
Oh, good. For a minute there, I thought my dream was having a bicentennial minute.
They became so easy to make fun of.
Walter, I asked you for one good reason, not a bicentennial minute!
They basically became the butt of lots of jokes, but they were ubiquitous. By the time they were done, I was ready for them to go. And I'm not sure I could tell you one thing that I learned from them, but they were a big part of everybody's bicentennial experience.
Now the rebels knew why.
For Minnesotans, there was one example where we sort of intersected with the Bicentennial Minute. And weirdly enough, it had to do with All in the Family. Its most famous character was Archie Bunker, this white New York bigot.
That ain't the American way, buddy.
Archie Bunker learns that his son-in-law, Mike, was up for a job.
We may not even be going to Minnesota. There's somebody else up for the job, and he happens to be black.
This created all sorts of opportunities to reveal his ignorance about the state of Minnesota.
It was up to me. I sent every colored guy in New York to Minnesota. That I believe.
He uses this to launch into this unhinged rethinking of the meaning of the Statue of Liberty.
You're the one that needs an American history lesson. You don't know nothing about Lady Liberty. Standing there in the harbor with her torch on high, screaming out to all the nations in the world, send me your poor, your deadbeats, your filthy. And they're all free to live in their own separate sections. Where they feel safe, and then bust your head if you go in there. That's what makes America great, buddy.
I think we just heard Archie Bunker's Bicentennial Minute.
That great monologue was set up by the fact that he got to show his ignorance about what the state was, and that was, in a way, our Bicentennial Minute claim to fame here in Minnesota.
Local broadcaster KSTP picked up on the idea of the Bicentennial Minute and produced some of their own ambitious shorts to celebrate Minnesota history.
And the race to tell the news to St. Paul would become just another Minnesota memory.
One of these shorts introduced Minnesotans to the man who was most likely the first person of African descent born in what would become Minnesota.
It began with George Bonga, who was from this family of black French fur trappers.
KSTP needed black talent to bring Bonga to life and called upon two artists who were traveling the state collecting oral history interviews about the African American experience in Minnesota.
We took the detour to hook up with these folks at an old restored fort. Malik as George Bonga and me as his right-hand person. And so we're running through this prairie. One of the stories about George Bonga is he was so big, so strong, that he was able to carry like 700 pounds on his back. And really, it was us wanting to tell our story and emphasizing that we didn't want to depend on other folks to tell that story.
Twin Cities PBS produced a weekly talk show listing bicentennial events and updates. No copies from these programs seem to exist, which might not be so bad, as they didn't sound like riveting television for a Saturday night. But local news stations had crews out and about, documenting a wide range of events leading up to and during the summer of '76.
So these were stories created by the field crews and turned into packages that would air.
Wally Pickle likes a good joke. That may explain other parts of his act. He says gimmicks are just smart showbiz.
In addition to the evening news broadcasts, local daytime TV also fed viewers a steady diet of bicentennial boosterism. This included taking Minnesotans on a tour of Revolutionary War-era historic sites out east.
Very nice to be talking to the people of Minneapolis again, you know. That's my favorite part of America.
And a half-hour special at the Great Minnesota Get-Together to cap off the summer of '76 called The Fair of a Lifetime.
You were there, the time of your life, Bicentennial Fair.
At an expanded Heritage Square, a sense of early America has been enhanced this year in a new area with a family living in an authentic log cabin.
And in Only in the 70s touch, the special was sponsored by
McDonald's
and
Weight Watchers. It's great to be alive and slim.
This special featured grandstand shows with acts as wide-ranging as Bill Carlson's super wide 70s collars, including the Osmonds, Charlie Pride, Neil Sedaka, and other national acts that took the grandstand stage that summer.
The real passion is automobile racing.
But there are so many bicentennial activities all over the nation. It's just fascinating.
Yes, Jessie Lou, with folk festivals, restorations,
Music, films, ecology projects.
Each state could put forth a town and a city to be officially recognized as national model bicentennial communities. And in Minnesota, Duluth was the city, and Fertile and Polk County was our national bicentennial town. Preserved in the state archives is a program from the day. And you can really see the pride that this town of Fertile took in the visit by the lieutenant governor and being named a bicentennial community.
We were really happy that Fertile was chosen for that honor, and there was no doubt in our mind that we deserved it.
I had the great pleasure of visiting Fertile a few years ago to conduct some interviews about their experiences during the bicentennial years. How did you become involved with the Fertile Bicentennial Committee?
The newspaper editor of a small town is involved in everything. When the bicentennial came about, it was a logical step forward for me not to just report it, but to also become active on the committee and in the activities.
Funded projects needed to fit into 3 bicentennial themes: heritage, festivals, and horizons.
Civic leaders, and particularly the mayor, engaged with this concept and really thought hard about what they could do in heritage, festival, and horizon, these 3 areas. They made a lasting impact, and you can see some of those lasting impacts in and around Fertile even today.
It was going to be historic for Fertile, but it was going to carry into the future as well. Things that were happening during this observation would impact future generations.
They also used some bicentennial matching grant funds to buy some land outside of town. The Sand Hill Recreation Area, which is on the map today, is another of these enduring legacies of Fertile's engagement with the bicentennial.
I thought it was a pretty ambitious plan because it was just woods out there. Dwan and some of the other people that had been natives here realized the value of it. And of course, the Nature Conservancy had been keeping an eye on the areas around Fertile and around Minnesota to preserve these historic and special places.
Fertile is the flower city, and if you approach the city from the south, on the west side of the road, you'll see the name Fertile, F-E-R-T-I-L-E, spelled out in 8-foot-tall flowers that bloom every year. And nearly 50 years later, that display is still there.
It brought their families in and brought other people that were on different committees. They offered to the community what their talents were. That was one of the big events for Fertile's history.
When Duluth was named the state's bicentennial city, the Duluth Bicentennial Committee ensured it would be a year-long event that no one would forget. And the Bicentennial City title couldn't have come at a better time.
The late 60s and the early 70s was not a super financially stable time for Duluth or cities in the United States that were industrialized. Manufacturing is moving overseas, and the economy in Duluth, it kind of falls out from underneath us. This is happening the same time that passenger service railroads in the United States are also collapsing. Instead of investing in the revitalization of those buildings in that space, it ends up that a lot of them fall to the wrecking ball as part of like urban renewal in the 60s and 70s. There was a passenger station a block and a half from here that did ultimately come down. The depot very narrowly avoided the wrecking ball, and we were only saved because of community involvement. In old newspaper ads talking about the bicentennial projects that are going on, and if you want to get involved, it's come to the bicentennial offices at the depot. So a lot of the cultural movers and shakers of the mid-70s were involved in this depot project, and we were kind of like a hub in the same way that we had been a rail station connecting the communities of northern Minnesota.
In addition to historic preservation, there were several ethnic celebrations highlighting different cultures sprinkled across 1976.
Tall ships, that's still a thing that's pretty associated with Duluth, and it comes about during the 76 celebration to have the big Norwegian sailing vessels make their way here into our harbor.
These lakes are so great that they are more or less a mini ocean.
There was also a voyageur party. A bunch of Duluthians out in canoes recreated the voyage of Daniel Greysolon, Sir Duluth, from Montreal to Park Point here in Duluth.
This civic engagement, cultural enrichment, historic preservation, and redevelopment from the Bicentennial boosted the struggling city into the world-class tourist attraction Duluth is today. Along with parks, nature preserves, and countless planted trees, the Bicentennial Commission was on a mission to beautify Minnesota.
We should remember that 1970 was the first Earth Day. So here we have this kind of greater consciousness and awareness of the fact that environment matters. In Minnesota, one of the bicentennial activities was called the Aesthetic Environment Program. They spelled the word aesthetic starting with an E, so it was EEP. EEP was really put into motion to work on cleaning up our environment, and so we could take a kind of greater pride in outdoors. There were tens of thousands of abandoned automobiles across Minnesota. They're either safety hazards or they're at least eyesores and possibly environmental hazards. What's leaking out of these cars? So the Aesthetic Environment Program took upon itself, really with some funding, to collect these abandoned automobiles, and they collected thousands of these cars. So I think this is one of the lasting impacts of the Aesthetic Environment Program, something that EEP with director Lois Polari can be really proud of.
It wasn't so much the landscape changed, it was we saw the landscape differently. There was, of course, the big move to tear down downtown St. Paul as part of that post-war modern movement. The federal government had decided it was going to basically give away buildings that they thought were obsolete. And there sat the old federal courts building, Landmark Center. It was not in a ruin exactly, but sort of semi-ruined. So the city purchased the building from the federal government for $1 and then sold it to the county for $1. With the opening of the bicentennial movement and historic preservation, it became a bicentennial project. Well, there's also a notion that preservation should be expanded to the non-elite population, everyday people. All kinds of places should be preserved because they represent America and what's good about America. So the federal government created these historic tax credits that you could apply for if you were in a designated area or if you had a designated building. And the community here was very aggressive, I guess I'll say, about declaring buildings significant. So there was money available, but there was also a will to put things in a positive light. Instead of being a problem to tear down, it became a resource to build up.
From school plays about the Declaration of Independence to operas and everything in between, performing arts was for many a way to celebrate the nation's 200th anniversary.
I've been in music my whole life. And in 1976, for the Bicentennial, Minnesota Opera commissioned Dominic Argento, and he did an opera called The Voyage of Edgar Allan Poe. And it was a huge opera. Big cast, orchestra, chorus. It's a piece that I'm very fond of. During the Bicentennial, the people who did the commissioning probably were thinking that they're going to give us something that's really yay rah rah America. There were pieces that did that, but other composers felt that they had free rein. Dominic Argento, writing Edgar Allan Poe, well, yes, he was an American figure, but was that what people thought it was going to be? Because if you're going to ask a composer to compose something, you have to give that composer some freedom if you expect anything to be inspiring. In 1969, when I began Plymouth Music Series, I knew that if you wanted to get attention, you needed to do something that created a bang. I picked up the phone and called Aaron Copeland and said, I would like you to come to Minneapolis and conduct your choral music. And he said, young man, no one has ever asked me to do that. So Aaron came, and we became good friends. In 1976, when he came and conducted, he was the same charming, enthusiastic man that I knew.
Recorded July 4th, 1976.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's a real pleasure to celebrate the 4th here in Minneapolis. Here are 4 movements from the ballet Rodeo. Some people say Rodeo. I asked in the West how they say it. They said, you say it the way you like.
Having studied ballet and contemporary dance and many other forms that were very Western, there was this desire to find things that were more relatable. So myself and some other young people studied some African dance. I really believed in sharing this dance, this culture. We were a highlight of the Minnesota Renaissance Festival for many, many years. Someone from the Bicentennial Commission called us. And we were contracted to go to a county fair. And the grandstand sat in the middle of a racetrack. The wood on the stage was very weathered and splintered. For what we do, because we dance in bare feet, we cannot dance on that. Well, okay, here's what we can do. We can put you off in this corner of our grounds and you can perform there. We said, okay, great. And so we started our performance, and basically, no one watched us. Yeah, it was like some sort of weird dress rehearsal or something. It was very odd and peculiar. It wasn't very welcoming, wasn't warm. Certainly, there was no encouragement from the fair to bring people there to us. About halfway through the performance, the musicians just said, we're not doing this. And I convinced them, no, let's just keep going. Let's just finish, let's finish. There was one individual who did stop and watch. This individual was a foreign exchange student from somewhere in Africa who was studying agriculture. And for him, I mean, during the entire performance, he just beamed. He smiled. After the performance, he came up to us and spoke with us, talking about how it reminded him of home. A few days after that, received a call saying that the remainder performances had been canceled. It left a bitter taste in one's mouth. We just wanted to share folk dances. That's what we were about.
Richard Thompson would wipe his feet of the racetrack mess and go on to have a notable theater career. Minnesota's multicultural performing arts offerings did find a receptive audience in the nation's capital. Each state hosted a bicentennial show at the Kennedy Center.
After some of the musical groups from Minnesota performed in the bicentennial celebration in Philadelphia, they took a bus to the nation's capital, where they continued their Minnesota Day performances.
Minneapolis' Zion Baptist Choir and the University of Minnesota's Symphony received a standing ovation at what organizers said was one of the better attended of the concerts. Bicentennial Energy and Funding also offered a canvas for visual arts, video, and film projects. The grassroots film and video production movement was on the move in Minnesota, made more affordable and accessible by new gear and training through groundbreaking organizations like Film in the Cities and University Community Video.
It wasn't just film or video, but it was the content that you were trying to express, trying to find meaning
to share that with a broader audience. Between University Community Video, Film in the Cities, the Film Society, and also the Walker Arts Center, I had tremendous resources to study and learn and follow the practices of other filmmakers.
University Community Video, UCV, which would later become Intermedia Arts, offered alternative news and expressions about America and Minnesota in the 70s. To reach a wider audience, UCV videos were aired on Twin Cities PBS in a series called Changing Channels, and then Everybody's TV Time. One of these films documented a young Al Franken and his comedy partner, Tom Davis, who were on the rise as part of a new sketch comedy show called Saturday Night Live. They were back in the Twin Cities producing a bicentennial stage show for Dudley Riggs' Brave New Workshop. But most of the Portapak produced documentaries that aired on public TV didn't feature local celebrities. The content often centered progressive politics, liberation movements, and diverse voices. In the 70s, in a real way, the revolution was televised.
Well, we're talking about 1976, and that was an era that was often called the second wave of the feminist movement. In the 1970s, women still didn't have equity in all areas.
There's one thing that was very clearly different about UC Video. They made an effort to include women in the filmmaking process. Women's interest in filmmaking came together under an organization called Twin Cities Women's Film Collective. Women that wanted to express specifically the subject matter and the point of view that they had through the medium of filmmaking.
The collective was one of the many Minnesota arts groups to receive bicentennial funding to create local history and humanities projects. The group's film would become one of the most notable and lasting Minnesota bicentennial outputs.
And it was called My People Are My Home, and it featured Meridelle LeSueur, the mentor and inspiring figure for the women doing the film. And they put her writings together with very lyrical and poetic images.
I had my child at the general hospital. It was crowded. Beds in the hallways, pregnant women turned away. The doctor said that these women were peasant women. They felt nothing, he said, and were valuable for experimentation. I knew then what to write and who for.
I was a part of what people are describing as the Black Arts Movement, which was the cultural component to the Civil Rights Movement and the Black Power Movement. Within the African American community, there were these different attempts to establish these cultural institutions. Getting caught up in this rich mix of culture and politics, the Way in North Minneapolis on Plymouth Avenue, the African American Cultural Center where I worked in South Minneapolis, Inner City Youth League in St. Paul on Selby Avenue. During that time, Lou Bellamy started Penumbra Theater. Sounds of Blackness began a few years earlier. The Minneapolis sound, the seeds were planted for that. You know, we started to hear about the bicentennial. We applied for and received this grant, and the outcome was this exhibition at the African American Cultural Center that focused on blacks in Minnesota. My great-grandfather was born in slavery in the 1840s, freed himself to join the Union Army. He ended up in Red Wing, Minnesota in the 1870s. This is a story that is my story, but it's also the story of so many folks.